Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the office hour for today. So I noticed that we have some questions that was submitted through the form, and I'm just going to take the ones that are in line with this week's materials. So yeah, let me just quickly copy questions and share my Dartpad. Okay, let's clear that. So we have this here. Then we have this, then we have this. Let me just take that out. Okay, then we also have, okay, let's take one question at a time. All right, so the first question is, in week 2 task, we were expected to add a comment over each expected result. Please, what does that mean? Very simply, the purpose of adding comments to that task is just so that you all would get used to writing comments in your code. Say, for example, you have your for loop. You have your for loop and you have it like so. Right? You could just add a simple comment, loops through numbers 1 to 30. Right? The purpose of comments is just so that you can, The purpose of comments is just so that you can, when you go back to read your code, you can very easily understand what you wrote. Because sometimes when you're writing code to perform a certain action, you could just go with the flow, and then the next time you read that code, you would be totally lost as to your thought process at the time. That's why it's advisable that you write code, you write comments often, so that whenever you do go back to read your code, seeing the comments that you left would kind of help you to understand what you were thinking of or how your mind was working at the time when you wrote that code. So it's just a way to encourage that you'll learn how to write comments as you code. That's the whole point of saying that you should add comments in the different parts of your code, right? I hope that answers the question. Then number 2 says, how can I save an uncompleted task on Dartpad so that I can continue from where I stopped when I log in? Well, if this is the only Dartpad instance that I have, if I were to copy this and paste in my browser, it's going to take me to that it's going to take me to, it's going to load up that instance, right, of my Dartpad, of the code in my Dartpad. But when you generate, when you create, when you create a gist, it's sort of, when you create a gist, it generates a new link to access this state of your code, right? Now, let's just look at that example. So say I create a public gist. You see that the link has changed from just having a plain ID to being assigned a new ID. With this ID, if I paste it on any kind of browser, I would be able to access this instance of my Dartpad. But if I were to make changes to this code, after generating the link, chances are that whoever accesses this link would not see whatever updates that you make, except if, I think, you, how do I go to the list of gists? Except if you click on this button here. What this does is whatever changes you make, you can, whatever change, because if you don't update the gist and you just copy this link and you send it, whatever changes you make will not be updated. So most people who generated a link first before doing their work and not updating the gist, you get to see an incomplete work. So when you're done, ensure that you update the gist, which will literally modify whatever code was compiled when you generated this link. And then if I do go to this link, or if you do go to this link at any point, you'll be able to see that updated instance of your Dartpad. I hope that helps. Then number 3, please, can you write out some keyboard shortcuts in Dartpad for us? Keyboard shortcuts like how to copy and paste, how to import, how to highlight, and other shortcuts. Do you mean shortcuts for Dartpad? If you're looking for Dartpad shortcuts, just come here to the bottom left of your screen, and it's going to show you the different ways, different shortcuts available. These are shortcuts for a Mac. So if you're using a Windows PC, it should show you the shortcuts that are applicable, right? So just click on this keyboard icon here at the bottom left, and it should show you all the shortcuts that are available on Dartpad. I hope that helps. Let me quickly get the other question that was submitted using the form. Oh, someone asked, I tried installing Android Studio, but it's saying missing SDK. What will I do? Sorry, I'm not going to answer this question because it's not in line with our week's topic. So when we get to the week where we're supposed to handle this, then we can probably debug together. But for now, I would not be taking questions relating to another week's task. All right, let me paste the second question. Oops. So okay, it says those tasks as a starter slash beginner now is too hard for us. I'm trying to do my tasks, but I'm getting error. Please, Abbie, let us know its rules and where to use functions. I'm not sure how best to answer this question. Let's just. I'm not sure how best to answer this question because in previous office hours, in the last 2 office hours, we actually went through functions and how to use functions, how to create functions, different types of functions, and that already should guide you on the basics of functions, right? I believe that we did cover it from ground level upwards to the point where everyone was everyone wasn't confused at the end of the session. But as a refresher, I'm just going to do what's it called, an overview of functions, right? A function, pretty much, like the purpose of functions is literally for instructions, right? A function has a list or just one instruction that you give to your program on what exactly you want it to do. Just as say the purpose of a spoon is maybe to eat or to eat, right? That's like the primary function of using a spoon. That is what you use it for. Same thing, okay, maybe not the same thing. Maybe that's like a very odd example, but a code to functions are supposed to do one thing. An ideal function does one thing, has one purpose. For example, like the examples that we used in the past, say we have a function that's supposed to print my name. Now, going by the name of this function, I expect this function to do one thing, which is to print my name. If I have a function that says print my name and I go ahead to, and I go ahead to print my age, right? This is going to be very confusing because first off, we gave this function a name. Ideally, the name of your function should match the body of your function. So if your function has a name of, if your function's name, for example, in this case is print my name, we expect that what is being printed is my name because it should go in line with the name that you're giving to your function, right? If your function, the purpose of your function is to, what's an example? Is to display a color, for example. And I go ahead to display a name. And I go ahead to display a name. This goes against the name that we've assigned to our function, and it's just not a proper way to handle functions. The name of your function should be in line with what is in the body of your function, what your function is actually doing. That's one. Yeah, so you have to be careful with the kind of names that you give to your function. Say, for example, with the task says you're supposed to add 2 numbers, and you go ahead to name your function divide 2 numbers, but inside of the body, you're adding 2 numbers. That's very confusing. And if someone else were to read your code, they would have to maybe look at it 2-3 times to understand what is going on. So that's something that you should note, that when you're naming your function, you should name it according to what it is intended for, right? Another thing is, yeah, so like I said, functions carry instructions that you give to your program. So this instruction here is pretty much telling the program to print this string, right? If we call this function, it's not going to do anything else but to print this string. It's not going to go ahead to it's going to act according to the instructions that we give it. Okay, so that's like the main purpose of functions. And this is a function declaration. You could either use an expression, which is this, or you could make it body by using two curly brackets. And yeah, by using two curly brackets. But like I explained in previous office hours, if you have a function that doesn't have any logic, that pretty much does one single action, you could as well just use an expression. This is to limit the number of lines of code that you have. Like you saw that we went from having 3 lines of code to having just 1 line of code, which makes our code more readable and just limits the number of lines that we get to read whenever we come to a certain file, right? So that's another thing about functions. Also, yeah, so this is a function declaration, and if I were to call this function, all I need to do is to type in the name of the function, followed by parentheses, and then you end it with a semicolon. Semicolon is is similar to a full stop in a sentence. When you have a full stop in a sentence, it kind of closes that sentence, right? The same way you have with semicolons, a semicolon kind of closes an expression or a statement or whatever it is that we're declaring in our code. So this kind of seals it, right? So just like this, very short, we have called our function, and if we were to run the code, we're expecting, okay, let's change this to go with the actual purpose of our function. So my name is Abbie, and we have, so if we were to run this, we would have, my name is Abbie, in the console as intended by our function, right? We also covered that you cannot call a function before it is declared. If I were to call our function here, it's going to throw an error telling us that local variable can't be referenced before it is declared. So for us to properly call this function, we need to call it after its declaration. It could be in the very next line. It could be many lines after, but it has to be after the line. After we have declared the function, we have closed up the function. If we're using curly brackets, it would be after the curly brackets. Say, for example, we have curly brackets here. And we want to call this function, we'll call it right after, or at any point we want to call it, but it has to be after the function is declared, right? Any other way, and our Dart is going to shout at us, right? But it's different if you call this function outside outside our main method or outside in a let's just use what we have going on here in Dartpad. It's different when you call your function outside main method. You can call it above, you can call it below, because it's not exactly within a certain okay, let me see if I can properly explain this. So when we run our code, we have, let's just clear all this. Looks like there's so much going on here. Let's just leave the second question. So when we run our code, if we have a list of codes, if we have a code here, we have a code here, we have a code in the next line, and we just have a list of code, a list of functions, or a list of things in general. Say, okay, let's use a proper example. We have print Abbie, we have print back, we have print 50, we have print 4 times 6. So we have four print statements here, and we called a function here. If we were to run our code, we expect we have this in the console. So you see that what's going on? Okay, we see that it starts from Abbie to black to 50 to the multiplication before it calls print my name. So when our code is run from top to bottom, right? So this is like a function body, right? If this is pretty much the access point of our code. So I already explained the importance of having a main method, and you should note that you can only have one main method in your Dart code. Anyway, so this is a function body, and whatever is inside is going to be called from top to bottom. It's going to be called from top to bottom. So, what was the purpose of talking about this now? I lost my train of thought, but hold on, it's going to come back in a bit. Oh, I can't remember why I started talking about this. Can anyone remind me, please? I'm so sorry. Okay, yeah, I remember now. I was sorry, I lost my train of thought there. I was trying to explain why the difference between having our function inside of the main body and having it outside of the main body. Because when we have the function outside of the main body, we see that we can call the function in what looks like it is ahead of the declaration. But this function exists on its own, and we can call it at any point. If we have the function above the main body like this, we'll still be able to access the function. If we call it outside the main body, we'll still be able to, below the main body, it doesn't matter. What matters is in the case where it is actually declared inside of this function body, then we would only be able to access this function after it is declared and not before. So just please take note of that. Yeah. Yeah, so that clears that. Yeah, we already did go through the different types of functions that have a return type, functions that do not have a return type. We also covered the different ways in which we can declare functions. We talked about arguments. So to understand these things, just please go through the last 2 office hours for the week. It's going to, I mean, after watching this, if this part is clear, please go to the previous office hours and see the different types of functions and how we declared all of them in the 2 sessions. Okay. All right. Those are the questions that I saw that were submitted using the form. There isn't any other There isn't any other question on the sheet, so we're going to call it a day. I don't understand your question, Remy, which is before, which is after. I'm not sure I get what you're asking. Well, yeah, those are all the questions that we get to answer today. If there is anything that's still unclear about functions, please do well to ask using the form, and we'll cover it tomorrow in our office hour. That said, thank you all so much for joining today. See you tomorrow.